Is it getting intense? Yes. So I would open the windows if I were you, because Trent is starting to apply the pressure. So we're on page 95, and I'll try to go from 95 to 111, and that might be 3 chapters. These are very short chapters. Let's go. Trent almost ran into Sarah Downs when he stepped in the hallway. She was standing immediately outside the door, and Braxton and the senator were not in sight. He was pleased to see her, a sudden and unexpected flash of brightness in the bleakness of headquarters. "Keeping watch?" he asked, a bit teasing in his voice. "I'm interested, and I always pace the floor when I'm killing time." Sighing, she said, "How's it going?" He shrugged. "We're only in the preliminary stage. He seems like a nice kid, well-mannered, apparently sincere." For her sake, he didn't emphasize apparently. She gave him a wisp of a smile. "Well, that's nice to hear. Any new developments?" "I think they've stopped looking for new developments, although Braxton keeps sniffing around. He never sleeps, literally." Trent didn't take her up on Braxton's sleeping habits. "Otherwise, nothing's going on. They figure you've got the proper suspect in there, unless I find him innocent." "Do you think you will?" Was there a challenge in her voice? Why did this young woman disturb him? Why was it important to justify himself to her? "If he's innocent, I'm going to find out," he replied, aware again of her cologne, feminine, subtle. "I hope so," she said, reaching out and touching his arm. This is awkward. "I'm sorry if I seem so negative, so abrasive in the car. I realize how hard your job can be. I apologize." "No apology necessary," Trent said. He felt suddenly cheered, as if someone had opened a window, allowing a fresh breeze to invade the hallway. "Yeah, I told you, open the window." "And no, I'm not talking about Solomons Lot." "I'd better get back," he said, although reluctant to end the conversation. "I wanted the boy to have a few minutes alone. The line of questioning so far has thrown him off balance a bit. I think the stage is set for the next level." He wondered why he was telling her this, why it seemed important that she should know what he was doing. "Well, good luck to both of you," she said. Trent was pleased that her voice didn't convey the sarcasm he expected. Jason was thirsty, his throat parched, his mouth so dry that his tongue seemed to have swelled up. That's what happens when people are nervous. Funny, but he hadn't realized he was thirsty until Mr. Trent said he'd bring him back something to drink. He noticed for the first time the absence of windows in the room. Mr. Trent puzzled him. He seemed friendly, like he really wanted to help and find out who murdered Alicia, wanted to help Jason remember what had really happened that day, but at the same time there was something about his questions. Jason used the word strange for want of a better word. He couldn't figure Trent out or what he wanted Jason to say. Sometimes he seemed unfriendly, like Jason had done something wrong, had broken a rule Jason didn't even know about. Those eyes of his, like black marbles but alive, that didn't blink very much, that seemed to look right into your brain. On top of all that, he felt that Mr. Trent was disappointed with his responses. Maybe right now, this minute, he was reporting to that detective that the questioning wasn't going very well. A dawn of hope. Maybe they'd decide to call the questioning off and he'd be free to go home. Jason wondered whether the other guys had done well, had answered all the questions correctly, had even remembered something that would be vital, provided clues that might lead to solving the murder and catching whoever had killed poor little Alicia. He also wondered whether he should tell Mr. Trent that he hadn't told the detective about the afternoon. But he discarded the thought. Mr. Trent's job was to find out about suspicious strangers in town, or people out of context. Anyway, Jason wasn't sure exactly what had been going on between Alicia and Brad, if anything had been going on after all. Sadness welled up within him as he thought of Alicia and the last time he had seen her, not knowing it would be the last time. How he wished he had seen something to help the investigation. How he wished Mr. Trent would help him remember a suspicious person he might have forgotten about, although Jason didn't think that was likely. How could he forget something that important so completely? Yet the police, and especially Mr. Trent, who was supposed to be an expert at stuff like that, certainly knew more than he did about how the memory worked. In fact, Jason was kind of awed by the way the questioner seemed to know sometimes what he was thinking. Like when he had that wild idea about making up a suspicious person. Better be careful, Jason warned himself. Why should I be careful? A nagging thought just below the surface of his mind gave him an uneasy feeling again. The feeling that something was wrong, that things were not what they seemed. Was that his imagination or just being in this small office? No AC, not even an electric fan. For some reason, the blank walls bothered him. No pictures, no windows. I want to get out of here. He realized that he could get out of there. He could simply get up and leave. He didn't have to even speak to anybody. And they said this was voluntary. He was a volunteer. Well, he didn't feel like a volunteer anymore, and he wanted to go home. And Jason pushed back his chair, winced at the scraping sound on the bare wooden floor, and made his way to the door. So, interesting chapter. Suspense. I'm interested in this Brad character. Jason wasn't sure about what exactly had been going on between Alicia and Brad. So I need to explore this. But we'll go to the next chapter. Honduran coffee is better than Starbucks. I just needed to throw that in there for the record. The office was empty, the boy gone. Trent stepped back into the hallway and saw Sarah Downs disappearing around the corner at the far end and no one else in sight. The boy had obviously left the building, most likely escaping through the rear entrance. This doesn't look good for Jason. The word escape gave Trent a measure of satisfaction. Escape was certainly an indication of guilt. Why would the boy flee if he was innocent? Hurrying down the hallway to the rear door, he swung it open and stepped blinking into a blast of sunlight. Waiting for his eyes to adjust, Trent saw the outlines of two cruisers parked at haphazard angles and a figure approaching an overflowing dumpster. As his vision cleared, he saw that the figure was a derelict about to forage in the dumpster. He spotted the boy standing at the entrance of the parking area, shoulders drooping, head down, as if studying the pavement for answers to questions that Trent could only guess at. Jason! The boy glanced up, saw Trent, frowned, swayed slightly, as if trying to make up his mind whether to stay or leave. Stay, please, Trent said, going toward him. Why was he keeping the kid here? If he left, alarms would sound and a search would be launched, and all of it would point to the boy's guilt. I need him. I need him to confess to me. I'm sorry, the boy said, and they stepped into the shadows of an ancient brick building, its walls scrawled with graffiti. Trent checked the cruisers, saw that they were unoccupied. The derelict was busy looking through the debris on top of the dumpster. What made you leave? Trent asked genuinely. Well, he said he was going to bring him a Dr. Pepper. He never brought him a soda. I want to go home. I don't have anything to tell you. Well, let me be the judge of that, but you can't leave like this. It makes you look suspicious. Startled, the boy could only repeat the word suspicious. Look, no one has seen you leave. Let's go back inside. You have more information than you think you have. A cruiser swerved into the lot and pulled up in front of them. The sunlight flashing on the windshield, they stepped aside to let it pass. Okay, said the boy, sighing, doubt still in his eyes. He seemed frail, vulnerable. Okay, he said again, and allowed Trent to lead him back inside the police headquarters. He should have negotiated. He's like, you promised me a Dr. Pepper. Even better, an A&W root beer. A&W. Okay, now we're going to knock off just one more chapter. Where am I? And we're going to do 104 to 111. So here we go, third chapter. Let's forget that you tried to escape, all right. Trent knew it was important to enter the vital word into the record, and he leaned back with satisfaction, waiting for the boy's answer. All right, Jason said, glad to change the subject and move on with the questioning and get it over with. Yet he was dimly bothered by the word escape. Like he'd had a reason to run away besides just wanting to get out of there. Like he was guilty of something. Before we go back to what you witnessed on Monday, let me ask you some questions about Alicia. You were friends, weren't you? Jason nodded, relieved to be off on another subject, even if it was a sad subject. Let's see, you're 12 and she was 7, and yet you were friends. Did that seem unusual to you? She was a nice little kid, and she was always happy to see me, which was more than he could say about Brad and some of the other kids in the neighborhood, he thought. But didn't bother Mr. Trent with that information. And you liked visiting her? Sure. He wouldn't have visited her if he hadn't liked her. You said earlier that you helped her with the jigsaw puzzle. What was the subject of the puzzle? A cardinal. The bird. Big. It practically covered the whole card table she'd set up on the patio. 1,000 pieces. She was very good at spotting pieces. And it was a hard puzzle because all the red colors looked alike and just shaded a little, and I could hardly tell them apart, but she didn't make... And he stopped. Didn't make what? Jason realized how quickly Mr. Trent picked up on anything that he didn't want to talk about. Mr. Trent waited patiently. What was the harm in telling him? Make fun of me, he said, knowing how pathetic he sounded. Like the other kids, you mean? Jason nodded. Each admission he made depressed him. He had a feeling that he was telling this man way too much about himself. Did Alicia make fun of you sometimes, though? Well, you know, good friends sometimes poke fun at each other. Did Alicia? Jason smiled at a sudden memory. Alicia mocking him when he finally did manage to place a piece in the puzzle, imitating the careful way he would fit the piece into the slot, humming as he did so, a habit he had developed whenever he accomplished something. She imitated him perfectly. Yes, Jason said, his voice gentle with reminiscence and sadness, to acknowledging again that she was dead. Well, did this upset you? No, but the image of Alicia dead and the way she must have looked hidden under the brush and branches when they found her caused him to shudder a bit. You seem upset at the memory of Alicia poking fun at you, Trent said. No, I mean, it's not that, Jason said, discombobulated now, confused by the sad memory and Mr. Trent's sudden question. I was thinking of her just now, how it must have been, you know, how she must have looked when they found her in the woods. How did she look? Well, terrible, all covered over like that. Covered over with what? Well, branches and bushes and stuff. Does that upset you? The question, in fact, this entire line of questioning made Jason pause before replying. He didn't want to talk anymore about these things with a stranger like this man. It was like Trent was trying to peek into his heart. I don't want to talk about it, Jason said. About Alicia and the way she was found? Jason nodded. I realize how tough this must be for you, since she was such a good friend. But sometimes it's better to talk, instead of keeping it all inside. Maybe this questioning can help you personally as well as help the investigation. How can it help me? Jason asked, mollified a bit. Mr. Trent's voice had become soft and tender, his attitude suddenly sympathetic. There are such things as trauma, Jason. Shock. When something like this happens, the death of a friend, it can affect you emotionally and deeper than you think. And it's sometimes good to express your sadness and your anger and your regret. Regret? The word sounded strange. Something you're sorry about. Well, I'm sorry I'm sorry about what happened to Alicia. But what else can I be sorry about? That's for you to say, Jason. That's a question you have to answer, and I can't answer for you. Jason, puzzled and confused again, was aware of his thirst returning. Mr. Trent had forgotten to bring him a drink. His mouth was dry, tongue parched. He was afraid he might choke if he tried to swallow. He had heard somewhere that swallowing was a reflex action, that people couldn't help swallowing. Suppose he swallowed now and began to choke. He was aware, too, that he was sweating, that his t-shirt was stuck to his back, the perspiration like glue between his flesh and the cloth. He gulped in sudden panic. And when he spoke, his voice emerged in a kind of croak, like a frog's voice. "What?" Mr. Trent asked. Jason was relieved that he had found enough spit to swallow without choking. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Can I have a glass of water?" He saw the questioner hesitate. "I won't try to escape again," he said, immediately sorry that he had used the word. "You seem upset." "Upset about being sorry?" "I'm just thirsty," Jason said. "All right, I'll find you something to drink. You're important to this investigation, Jason, and if having a drink will make you feel better, then you'll have your drink." Why did the words sound so threatening? Like his thirst was some kind of admission. But of what? Trent went to the door, knowing that he was departing from protocol, breaking the rules. But his success was largely the result of following his instincts, and his instincts here told him to tread lightly, treat the boy gently, and to gain his entire confidence. He wondered if Sarah was back in the corridor with any news. The corridor was empty. He looked for a vending machine, found one tucked in an alcove near the back entrance. Returning with a can of Coke Classic cold in his hand, he waited for a moment outside the door, hoping for a glimpse of someone, anyone. Suddenly, lonely, an emotion foreign to him, he went into the office. Jason received the Coke with a murmur of thanks and added, "Did you get one too?" Trent shook his head. He suspended all hunger and thirst during interrogations, but the question surprised him. Subjects never considered him beyond his role as an interrogator, never made any personal remarks or inquiries. This sudden recognition of himself as a person by this boy made him pause. He watched the boy gulping the Coke greedily, his Adam's apple bobbing, his hand trembling slightly. Trent knew a moment of misgiving. This boy, vulnerable, defenseless, with no knowledge of what awaited him. Time to get out, Trent thought. Get this over with and collect his due from the senator, and somehow make his own escape. Keeps on building. It's a good chapter. So we'll stop here. Pull this out.